indriya, the senses. So artha and kama are pursued by everyone. Uh, Dharma is pursued by some section of society. Of course, we can understand that in a certain sense, every society has some idea of Dharma in the sense that there are rules and regulations for living in any society. Uh, there has to be that because otherwise you don't have a society. It's just anarchistic. Uh, Even totally atheistic societies have some idea of proper and improper action. Because if one uh, just goes around killing people and everybody's just okay with it, or stealing or doing some other nonsense, that society will not last very long. But of course, we understand that specifically Dharma means the injunctions of the Vedas, and a smaller number than those interested in artha and kama are interested in following Dharma, are interested in knowing the Vedic literature and following what it says. An even smaller number is interested in moksha, in becoming liberated from this material world. Uh, but uh, whoever is interested in any of these four processes, whether it is the large number of people that are interested in artha and kama, those that are interested in dharma, or those that are interested in moksha, all depends upon the favor of the Supreme Personality of Godhead for success uh, in that um, field of endeavor. Prabhupada mentions in the purport the karma mimamsa philosophy. This is the idea that if we work, then the results will come automatically. There is some law of nature by which we gain the results of our activities. And if I work hard um, or work righteously, it's the general karma mimamsa philosophy, then I will be elevated to the heavenly planets. And then what happens after that? Well, once I extinguish the uh, pious activities, the punya that I have accumulated, then I'll come back down to earth. And then, well, I can perform more pious activities and go back up to the heavenly planets. This is the karma mimamsa philosophy that is rejected by the Vedanta school in general, and specifically the Vaishnava school of Vedanta. Uh, Although interestingly, um, Krishna does speak the karma mimamsa philosophy in Bhagavatam, uh, but we understand, according to the acharyas, he's not doing it seriously. He's just trying to convince Nanda Maharaj to not worship Indra. But we should understand philosophically that the work or the endeavor itself is not sufficient for success and for the success of an action. It is said in Bhagavad Gita Adishtanam Patakarta Karanam Cha Pratag Vidam. Vidas Cha Pratak Cheshta Daivam Chai Vatra Panchama. The place of action, that is the body, the performer, the various senses, the many different kinds of endeavor, and ultimately the supersoul. These are the five factors of action. So we should understand that our success or failure in any endeavor depends upon these five factors. There is adishtanam, which is literally meaning the place, but here is clarified as the body. That I might try to endeavor for one result or another, but the body, that is the material apparatus through which I, the spirit soul, is trying to perform this action, will determine, at least partially, the success or failure of that action. I believe the Olympics are still going on now, and I might try to perform in an Olympic event, um, but because of my body, I will not be successful. I would fail in that action trying to win the gold because I do not have a suitable body for that activity. An even more, I guess, extreme example is that if I tried to fly, uh, by my own power, I would not be able to because if I had the potency to fly, I would be in a bird's body or a bat's body or an insect body or something like that. Sure. The karta is also a factor that in that there has to be a performer to perform the action. Uh, in that we understand the material energy does not move independently, but has to have the touch of the spiritual energy of the spirit soul in order to be animated and be compelled into action. The cardinal, the instruments, or literally this, or Prabhupada translates it here, the senses, are also required for the actions. I have uh, the point of the action or the process of the action are due to the contact between the senses and these sense objects, which lead to us desiring uh, to take some action and then endeavoring, cheshta. And specifically, it says in this Bhagavad Gita verse, uh, Pratak Vidyam Vividash Cha Pratak Cheshta, that there are different kinds of endeavor. Not everyone is endeavoring the same. Um, Broadly speaking, one can endeavor perform actions in tamagun, rajagun, or sattvagun. And according to that type of endeavor, one will get um, the results. Uh, and ultimately, there is Daivam, the supreme. And it is understood that that is explained in Bhagavad Gita, the purport, and also in this purport, that ultimately Daivam, the supreme or the super soul, is the ultimate decider of the results of one's actions. Um, it is said that if Krishna wishes to protect one, who can kill? But if Krishna wishes that one may die, who can protect? Ultimately, the uh, results for these four activities, or advancement in these four activities, dharma, artha, kama, and moksha, depend upon the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And therefore, uh, one should attempt to please the Supreme Personality of Godhead instead of endeavoring separately. Uh, and this is the various stages, or various processes of Bhakti Yoga, or Bhagavata Dharma, as Prabhupada terms it in the purport. This comes in various stages. Uh, we understand that there is the Karma Yoga stage, as explained in Bhagavad Gita. Prabhupada uh, mentions or quotes part of Bhagavad Gita 247. Karmanyeva dikaraste ma paleshu kadachana makarma palahitubur mate sango stuv akarmani. You have the right to perform your prescribed duty, but you're not entitled to the fruits of action. Never consider yourself the cause of the results of your activities, and never be attached to not doing your duty. So, what is being explained here is that one should work, generally speaking, one should work according to one's prescribed duties. That's one's dharma, according to one's position in the social order. But one should not be uh, attached to the fruits of one's activity, the karma pala. Because, as is explained by Prabhupada, the Acharyas, this is also material attachment. That whether one is attached to gaining some results from one's activity, or one is attached to giving up one's activity, both are symptoms of material desire. Uh, that one working for the Supreme Personality of Godhead will give up the entitlement to the fruits of action, but be very careful in his actions nonetheless, um, in following the rules and regulations of devotional service. On one level, this means following Dharma. There are various dharmas, um, various injunctions in the Vedic literatures. Some are general, they apply to everyone, and some apply to the specific mm, position that we have in the social order. You know, Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Shudra, um, Brahmacharya, Grihastha, Vanaprastha, Sannyas, man, woman, etc. And it is explained, Prabhupada explains in Bhagavad Gita 335, I believe, that until one is on the liberated stage, one must follow these rules and regulations of the Vedas, at least as much as possible. Uh, but of course, we understand that Bhagavat Dharma is beyond that. Pure Bhakti Yoga, especially the higher stages, Bhava, Prem, is beyond the rules and regulations of the Vedic injunctions, and consists solely of surrender to Krishna. As Prabhupada quotes in the purport, Sarvadharman Prityaja, Mam Ekam Sharanam Raja. Just give up all the varieties of dharma and surrender on to me. And in this way, one who takes shelter of the lotus feet of Krishna is delivered from the dualities of this material world, um, and goes back to Krishna. But as Prabhupada explains in the purport, we should understand what it means to take shelter of Krishna. And he specifies, he clarifies that doing so means to act according to the rules and regulations of devotional service. Devotional service is not a process of mental speculation, that the process by which we can go back to Krishna is already explained for us. We don't have to make anything up or supplement it or speculate about it. Thinking that oh, maybe this thing will, this process, um, will this or will this not help me reach Krishna? Or will this or will this not help me reach Krishna? No, the process is already given to us by the guru, by sadhus, as the acharyas, and by shastra. And if one follows these rules and regulations, then one gets the results. And if one does not follow the rules and regulations, then one will not get the results, or at least it will be very difficult to get the results. It's just like with anything, right? If I wish to obtain some qualification, such as a degree from a university, there is an authorized process according to the rules and regulations that I have to go and submit to a professor who has a syllabus that says, okay, you do these assignments, and you will get credit for this class. And then the registrar says, or the departments say, okay, you take these classes, and then you will get this degree. And if I want that degree, if I want that result, then I must follow the rules and regulations laid down by the keeper or the one who is giving that result. If I just approach, say some university, let's say Penn State, and tell them, I've studied so much Shakespeare, now I want a degree in physics, uh, they would say, um, that's nonsense, right? Because that is not the result to getting a degree in physics. Um, it might be one of the results to, it might be the process of getting a degree in literature, but even then, one has to follow the process. Similarly, to actually attain the lotus feet of Krishna, to attain the result that we want, we must follow the rules and regulations of devotional service. The various processes have been given to us by Srila Prabhupada, rising early in the morning, chanting with attention, trying to avoid offenses, reading Shastra, avoiding association with non-devotees, avoiding food cooked by non-devotees, um, associating and performing loving exchanges with devotees, performing devotional service in various ways, preaching, uh, trying to live according to the mode of goodness. All of these are rules and regulations that have been given to us by the spiritual master and the acharyas in order to assist us um, in our endeavor to go back to Godhead, to return to the lotus feet of Krishna. If we ignore these rules and regulations, on the other hand, it becomes far more difficult to reach the goal. Um, of course, it is not impossible that, Prabhupada gives the example of an honorary degree that sometimes universities, in recognition of some achievement or something, gives the person an honorary degree. You're an honorary doctor of, this and that, according to the activities, because of the activities you have performed. But, one should not expect an honorary degree. Generally, if one wants a degree, uh, or to go to the Olympics, or even such simple things as to, get one's tax return, one has to follow the rules and regulations of that process. And additionally, when specifically talking about devotional service, uh, one does not need to supplement the rules and regulations with anything else. Uh, Occasionally, of course, we do take mm, knowledge uh, or help from other processes in a supporting manner. In the sense, for example, I might take knowledge of physics or mathematics or philosophy uh, in order to use that language to preach Krishna consciousness. Of course, if I have a broken leg or something like that, we take advantage of medical knowledge, uh, the medical knowledge of the doctors, uh, so that I may uh, continue in my devotional service unimpeded by, a broken leg or a burn or whatever. But the only process required for our purification is devotional service. It is said, Prabhupada makes the point that by performing devotional service, and specifically by chanting the holy names of the Lord, that we can um, develop all good qualities. There's so many different um, self-improvement ideas, self-development, uh, therapies, psychological ideas, etc., which endeavor to improve one's life in one way or another, improve one's character or um, mental state or this and that. But one can get the result of all of these processes, get far beyond the result of all of these processes, simply by chanting Hare Krishna. One does not have to endeavor separately by um, hmm, including or separately performing all of these different processes. To think that we need something other than devotional service is actually mental speculation. We perform this mental speculation because being in the material world, we are of the disposition, we have the inclination that we do not want to surrender to Krishna, which is the conclusion of all of the Vedic scriptures. especially the Bhakti scriptures and the Acharyas and their writings, that actually Srimad Bhagavatam, Chaitanya Charitamrita, the writings of the Goswamis, etc., and all the Vedic literature, but directly those ones, have as their goal and as their content nothing other than discussion about the mm, full and unalloyed surrender to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Uh, but because we are attracted to things other than Krishna, we mentally speculate that maybe my life will be better if I do something else or have something else. There's some condition that I need to fulfill before I perform devotional service, or that I don't like that the rules and regulations of Shastra say to do it this way, so I will perform the service that way. My guru, my temple president, my mentors say perform the service like this. But, I'm very learned and I read Shastra, or think I can reason through Shastra in a certain way. Uh, so I'll perform the service like this. Uh, and then, when it blows up in my face, um, then, I'll blame my temple presidents. Uh, or if I am, as happens, many times, uh, somebody does not take seriously to the process of devotional service and then thinks, oh, I'm not tasting. Uh, you people have tricked me. You said that I'll get the ecstatic love of God, but you've made me waste my youth, serving Krishna. Uh, and they end up blooping, to use ISKCON lingo, and going away or complaining about the devotees or some project, or this and that. Or even if they don't fully go away, they might mm, become dissatisfied, uh, and look for their dissatisfaction on this devotee or that devotee or this circumstance or that circumstance. But we should understand that if we are dissatisfied in devotional service, if we are dissatisfied in our prosecution of Krishna consciousness, it is because we are not following the rules and regulations of devotional service correctly. The mm, process of devotional service is by nature blissful. Um, that simply by chanting Hare Krishna, one can develop ecstatic love of God. And simply by performing any process of devotional service, one can obtain love of God. But if we're not doing it correctly, then why should we expect that we will get it? I've made this point before, uh, and I'll make it that if anyone is dissatisfied in devotional service, they only have themselves to blame. Uh, because uh, automatically one is satisfied and one is happy if one is forming uh, devotional service correctly, because that devotional service is directly in contact with Krishna. How can one be in contact with Krishna and be unhappy uh, unless um, there is some discrepancy there, unless one is not correctly contacting Krishna? So we should hear from the proper authorities, Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra, and try to follow very carefully this process of devotional service with the rules and regulations as taught by those personalities. And in this way, uh, attain the lotus feet of Krishna and actually become happy. Because ultimately, we all want to be satisfied in our life. We all want happiness. The only way to happiness is devotional service. So take it up very seriously. Do not delay. Uh, we never know when we're going to leave this body. It's very risky leaving this body without being a pure devotee, because there's a chance uh, that in our next life uh, we might not take up devotional service. We might be given the chance, but we might not take it up. So I will end here. We have about 15 minutes for comments, questions, or complaints. Uh, if anybody would like to chime in.
Yeah, Peru, I'm trying to think of a question, but you covered the you covered the subject matter so thoroughly. There's can't come up with a question that you haven't already discussed.
Uh,
Anyway, I want to thank you for a very nice class. Did a great job of covering the topic, and it's nice to hear from you. I haven't heard that much from you lately because you've
mm,
been out of station, but it's great to hear from you again. Hare
thank you, Prabhu.
Krishna.
Hare Krishna. All right. Any other comments or questions?
Let me ask this.
Mhm.
In your personal experience, um, now you talk about following Srila Prabhupada's instructions, and sometimes um, devotees will um, suggest that pushing for a very strict interpretation or following very strictly constitutes some kind of fanaticism and is unreasonable or counterproductive. In your own experience, do you find that following more strictly yields um, uh, faster or better results, or that um, or that it somehow becomes an impediment?
Hmm. Yeah. So, you mentioned the word fanaticism. Um, I know this is one common, somewhat common epitaph. The question for those in the Pujari room was that sometimes devotees say that following too strictly can become an impediment or is fanaticism or something like that. And Tarka Prabhu was asking for my personal experience on if following strictly uh, is helpful for Krishna consciousness or is it an impediment to Krishna consciousness? Uh, and I'll say that generally speaking, following strictly, or my experience, following strictly has only helped me in my Krishna consciousness. There's a phrase, somewhat well known, should be more well known, from Jayadvaita Maharaj. that nobody ever fell down from following too strictly. Of course, we don't want to become, just like, dry Vedantists. But if one is following the rules and regulations because one is ordered to by one's spiritual master, that is not dry following. In nectar instruction, of course, there's niyamagraha and niyamagraha. Um, being unattached, too unattached to the rules and regulations, or being too attached to the rules and regulations. But that does not apply to the instructions of one's spiritual master. Uh, Following the instructions of one's spiritual master um, is the sum and substance of spiritual life, right? Yasya prasada and Bhagavat prasada, yasya prasada nagati kutopi. Without satisfying the spiritual master, one cannot satisfy the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And in my experience, that's true. Whenever I've been, trying to endeavor uh, in um, trying to satisfy my spiritual master, I've become satisfied. I've actually felt more of of the bliss of Krishna consciousness. While if I have tried to im- improve my situation by various other means, whether that's material means of changing my situation, psychological means of, this psychological idea, or, you know, getting in touch with your inner child or something like that. They're ineffective. They don't actually help you. Uh, the only thing that has actually helped me uh, improve my station in life is following the process of Krishna consciousness. And the more strictly I've tried to follow uh, the process of Krishna consciousness as much as I can, um, the better results that I've had. Uh, so, yeah, I can say by my own personal experience, by my own perception, pratyaksha, uh, that one will only be benefited if one follows strictly the process of devotional service. So that's my personal experience. And that is more than my personal experience, because, who am I? Uh, that is the words of Srila Prabhupada and of Shastra and the Acharyas. You can believe me or disbelieve me, but, who can argue with the Vedic literatures? Who can argue with Srila Prabhupada? Thank you for the question, Prabhu. I see the virtual hand of somebody named Zoom user.
Yes, Hare Krishna. This is Manvantara.
Hare Krishna.
Haribol, Prabhu. Thank you for class. This is really wonderful. I find in terms of following strictly and no one ever falls down from following strictly, I found your response a little duplicitous because at one hand, it is your experience and that's certainly appreciable, but it's also everyone's experience. So this idea of following strictly, the human factor, it doesn't consider the human factor because hard-heartedness is comes from following strictly. And we can see in the Vedas how Krishna is really um, impressed with the love of the gopis, the love of the girls on rooftops who are spontaneously giving love and affection and glorification of him, more so than like the strict adherence to the Vedas and the Brahmanas who are chanting strictly, like the Brahmanas and the Brahmanas' wives, for example. So I mean, it is a matter of personal experience, as you say, but this notion of following strictly is is different for everyone because everyone can only do their best, and what's best for you may not be a strict factor for someone else. So you answered the question, but it was both. You did both. It wasn't clear that you can only one
So,
person can only do the best they can.
so the point that you mentioned about strictness leading to hard-heartedness applies to the various Vedic injunctions. And we understand that there is many injunctions in the Vedas. And I did mention about niyamagraha and niyamagraha, right, from nectar of instruction. Uh, Not following closely and following too closely. But if one reads the purport to that verse, uh, it is talking about the various Vedic injunctions, which is true. We do see with rishis or even impersonalists that hard-heartedness does come, but it does not apply to strictly following the instructions of the spiritual master. If one strictly follows the instructions of the spiritual master, one's heart does not become hard, it becomes soft. Right? Why would Srila Prabhupada instruct us for things that are not for our benefit? And yes, Krishna is ultimately uh, interested in our love and pure love. You mentioned the gopis, the ladies on the rooftops, the wives of the brahmanas. You could also say cowherd boys. So many varieties of rasa. But if we try to attain that level without being purified by the process of devotional service, by the rules and regulations of devotional service. That is sahajism. That we should not think that we can automatically jump to that level, right? That is why Srila Prabhupada gave us all the rules and regulations, so that we could come to that level uh, and uh, actually have it be authentic instead of uh, mm, simply taking it as sentiment. Uh,
I mean, I hear what you're saying. I'm really thinking about in raising children, for example, in Krishna consciousness, with this idea of strictly following, it doesn't lead to an embrace, love, spontaneous affection for Krishna. This idea of strictly following in household life leads to more impersonalism and neglect of someone's spontaneous affection and where they're at instead of looking at the growing picture. I mean, I hear what you're saying, but I'm just don't think you're really appreciating what I am saying. And so strictly following the idea is strictly following according to your ability and where you're at. So a child, for example, you would expect, say a 14-year-old, we say a child, but a 14-year-old has all the abilities to strictly follow, but the affection has to be there, the process has to be there. You can't compare a 14-year-old person strictly following to your standards of strictly following, I guess is the point I'm trying to make.
right. So yes, we do understand uh, that while there is the process, there is the standard of strictly following, due to various circumstances, there might be some, you could say deficiency, or you could say that one might not be able to follow uh, all in all the every single injunction. For example, I was listening to a lecture, a recording of a lecture by my Guru Maharaj, Somebody asked him specifically about this point of, when raising children, and specifically, uh, for mothers, who are, uh, you know, generally very busy, especially with, very young children. And Gurudev said, that he generally tells mothers that, um, as long as they're chanting 16 rounds, then he's happy. You don't have to, if they're not able to, go to the temple or read so much, and of course, if they are, then it's good. But if, you know, as long as they're chanting, then, that's fine. So yes, we do take into account circumstances, and that is why, one has the guru, or if, one's guru is not available, uh, you know, god siblings, god brothers or god sisters, or god brothers and god sisters of one's guru, uh, so that one can uh, figure out how to apply the strictness in a reasonable way or a practical way in one's life. The danger on the other side, of course, we recognize where people are at, but we don't want this idea of, oh, this is just where I'm at, to become an excuse for not pushing ourselves more. That, oh, this is just where I'm at, so, I'll eat karmi grains or, do this or do that, and, that's just where I'm at. Okay, you can say that's where you're at, but don't expect to get the results if you are, uh, or expect to only get the level of the results at the level that you follow, is my point, right? You can't say, I'll follow however I want, and then get the results uh, of the following strictly. If you want the result of following strictly, whatever that looks like in your individual circumstances, then um, you need to follow strictly, right? There is, like I said, and as you were bringing up, um, the point that different people have different circumstances. We are a personalist philosophy. So what following strictly looks like will depend on our different circumstances. And even, for example, in our different ashrams, right? So what following strictly looks like for me as a brahmachari will look different for a grihastha, right? But the principle is still there of following as much as we can. Uh, in order to get the result. As far as the specific uh, point that you mentioned of if following strictly will lead one's children to have taste or not have taste for Krishna consciousness, I won't speak of so much since I don't have experience in that. All I can say is that um, we do see people who are raising children in Krishna consciousness. Uh, I know at least they personally have a reputation for being strict followers. I don't know how much or how little they pass that on to their children, but we see the children are still in devotional service. So uh, it depends on how that strictness is applied, and whether one's doing it, just to be strict for the sake of being strict or to satisfy the spiritual master. So Agari Krishna Prabhu said in the chat, the Prayojana Acharya of our parampara, Srila Raghunath Das Goswami, demonstrated the example of following strictly and not falling down. For example, offering hundreds of obeisances to devotees daily. Yeah, so Raghunath Das Goswami and so many other devotees Of course, we have the example of the Acharyas. We have the examples of even so many ISKCON devotees who follow strictly and didn't fall down. Our various spiritual masters, so many devotees. Tarka Prabhu.
Yeah, just a point of clarification. The example was given of the gopis versus the Brahmins, and it's important to understand the difference between Vaidhi Bhakti and, in this case, Ragatmika Bhakti of the gopis, um, and two entirely different universes. So strictly following the principles of Vaidhi Bhakti brings one to the practice of Raganuga Bhakti, and Raganuga Bhakti will lead to Ragatmika Bhakti. So, but the Ragatmika Bhakti practiced by the gopis is a very different thing than the practice of Vaidhi Bhakti. We are engaged in the practice of Vaidhi Bhakti. Vaidhi Bhakti um, is proportionately effective relative to the extent to which one applies the principles. So more strict adherence yields a better result. As far as family life from the platform of Vaidhi Bhakti, it happens sometimes that an individual who actually is an immature devotee and not expert in the practice of Vaidhi Bhakti attempts to be strict, but actually creates an atmosphere which is counterproductive for others and for themselves. But that is an immature application of um, the principles of Vaidhi Bhakti. Properly followed, the Vaidhi Bhakti will not be harmful. Strictly following Vaidhi Bhakti is not going to produce a negative result in one's own life nor in the lives of others. But if somehow or other someone improperly applies the principles of Vaidhi Bhakti, they can certainly do harm. And there's abundant practical experience in the history of our movement of individuals on the platform of Vaidhi Bhakti actually doing harm. But that is not the case when the principles are properly followed. Strict adherence is a good thing when it's done properly, of course. That's all I wanted to say.
All right, thank you for your comments, Prabhu. Uh, yeah, so I think that was the point. I don't know if there are any more comments or questions, so we can continue if anybody does.
Thanks, Prabhu, for the class. Just with regards to Mother Manvantar's contention, I think the synthesis is what Srila Bhakti Tirtha said in how to synthesize Nyamagraha and Nyamagraha, is that internally the principle of following strictly is really an internal disposition. So this today's verse is about fully depending on the disposition of the Supreme Lord. And so let me turn my video on here. Okay. Fully depending on the disposition of the Supreme Lord. And so when you are lenient externally with either your dependents or fellow devotees or colleagues, etc., that's part of the dependence in recognizing that you're not the sole determinant of action. That actually the results of action, it's actually the determinant factor is this sanction of the Supersoul. Right. So, although I don't have children myself, but for example, if you apply the same idea in a household, right? So a parent, I'm an older sibling, I have a younger sibling, and one child will be, follow the principles of the guru, which in this case is the parents, and then another child will be wayward. So they give them the same opportunities, same facilities, same education, similar instructions, similar strictness, even in terms of dealing with punishment. Another one will be wayward. So it would be a mistake, for the parents to actually and say the child develops a drug habit, like in my case, right? The younger sibling develops a drug habit. It would be a mistake for the parents to let the child's waywardness just derail the functioning of the household. So the child is like stealing resources, allocating it, trying to sell it and all that. So the parents actually have to draw a line. They have to draw a boundary and recognize that, okay, this wayward child, we prayed for a child from God. But just like Maharaj Anga, right? He prayed for a son to be an heir, and he turned out to be Vena, right?
Right.
So even devotees who follow strictly can actually, um, uh, you know, re- their children could be wayward, and that could be again the disposition of
Yeah.
the Supreme Lord. That in the
Srila
case of
Prabhupada's
Maharaj,
children weren't pure devotees.
yeah, and this is the disposition of the Supreme Lord. That okay, in Maharaj Anga's case, uh, he produced Vena. He had a purpose, yeah, for bringing Vena into the world, and obviously Prithu Maharaj arose from the body of Vena, the Shakti Avatar. So the principle applies is that what Srila Bhakti Tirtha said is that our disposition, in depending on the disposition of the Supreme Lord, is that we are strict internally, always, especially following the principles, the instructions of the spiritual master. And as a child, if your parents are guru and if you're fortunate that your parents are devotees, then that should also be your disposition. But if that's not your disposition, then your service depends on somebody else who's become wayward, then okay, well, you just try to view that situation in knowledge, try to pray to the Lord, try to pray for that dependent or that colleague, devotee, etc., who's affecting your life. You try to just view the situation through the eyes of the Bhagavatam, but you don't let external circumstances just mold your determination or just like influence your determination to actually follow strictly.
Yeah, thank you for your comments, Prabhu. Yeah, ultimately, of course, this determination to follow strictly is internal. Uh, and one can apply how exactly to do that based on the external circumstances. Uh, of course, when one does have dependents, it can be a bit complicated. Uh, and that, one is responsible for teaching them Krishna consciousness. Uh, but then also it's, up to them to accept or not. So, yes, thank you for your comments, Prabhu. It looks like Tarka, Prabhu, has a response or further comments.
Hare Krishna.
I will.
There were some specific instructions that Srila Prabhupada gave us in this regard. One of the general principles is that one should be strict with oneself, but lenient with others. As a parent, though, you have to utilize your intelligence to understand how best to cultivate Krishna consciousness in your dependents, your children, particularly. You're responsible as if you're a father and a husband, you're responsible for all your family members, their Krishna consciousness. If you treat them um, harshly, forcing your standards on them, the effort will typically backfire. You will tend to push them away. They will become resentful. In dealing with children in particular, Srila Prabhupada's instruction was that young children up to the age of 5, you are very lenient. You allow pretty much anything to go. You just allow them to be children. At the age of 5, you begin to um, uh, enforce some principles. You become a disciplinarian. Um, you insist upon certain principles. You try to instill important principles of Krishna conscious life in them. You can do that to some extent when they are younger, but you have to be very lenient. Age of 5 is actually the age at which one is ideally supposed to go to Gurukula. And at that time, you begin to take instructions from the spiritual master. So the role of disciplinarian, instructor and disciplinarian continues, Srila Prabhupada says, up to the age of 15. And then at 15, Srila Prabhupada says you become, rather than the disciplinarian, you become the best friend of the child. Because at that stage of their psychological and emotional development, if you try to be a disciplinarian, they will absolutely react badly. They will push back. They will, you will push them away. They will become resentful. The combination of their emotional and intellectual maturity versus their false ego is of such a nature that they will not be able to take your directives very well. So you just become their best friend. You always set the best possible example and encourage them as far as possible without dictating. And then for the balance of the child's life, all you can do is try to be a good example. So strict with yourself, you set an ideal example and hope that others will follow. You can't force anyone to be Krishna conscious, and no amount of hammering other individuals is going to be effective. You may push them away instead. You try to offer encouragement. You set an example. You give every opportunity. But for children, you have to establish some structure. Just as the spiritual master imposes actually structure on the disciple, you must rise early, you must attend the Mangala Arti, you must bathe, put on fresh cloth, chant 16 rounds, follow regulative principles, and so on. He imposes certain standards. Um, and um, and the imposition may be a strict one. You must follow the regulative principles. You must chant a minimum of 16 rounds strictly. You cannot deviate from this. Um, but trying to impose very strict adherence on children can absolutely be counterproductive, and the same is true for not just children but anyone. So those who are trying to instill Krishna consciousness in others have to be very sensitive to the actual position of those under their care. And you also should distinguish between those who are actually under your care and those who are not. Trying to impose or impress Krishna consciousness on individuals who are not your responsibility is often a bad idea. But there are individuals for whom we are responsible. You have a duty, an obligation to help them along. Others, there may be a duty or there may not. Um, let's say, for example, their spiritual master places them under your care. So then you have a duty, you have a responsibility, or they themselves may approach you and ask for your help. Please, I'm looking for guidance. Um, or mentorship or whatever, and then also you have an obligation, but it's often a mistake to take it for granted that it's your position to try to cultivate anyone and everyone necessarily, at least within the context of a temple environment or an ashram. Not everyone is necessary. It's not necessarily our job to try uh, cultivate everyone in the ashram who maybe is our junior. Although historically that was usually the case, and Srila Prabhupada encouraged that. Later, because um, that generalized approach of having, just any more senior devotee um, um, im impose themselves on juniors. It didn't always fly well. Later, we developed bhakti programs, and individuals who were particularly experienced or qualified by training or experience, it would become specifically their responsibility to cultivate the individuals in the ashram, uh, and um, and so junior devotees, bhaktas, would be actually shielded from other devotees who might um, have less expertise, and and so the effect of their preaching might be counterproductive. Um, Having been a bhakti leader for many years, I have lots of experience of this. We actually established separate facilities for the bhaktas. In the Boston Temple, there was one floor dedicated to the bhaktas, specific rooms for the bhaktas. Um, Certain individuals we would allow to visit, individuals who were, very excellent devotees. We would allow the bhaktas to experience um, the fine example of those individuals, but devotees in general, we protected the bhaktas from the general mass of devotees because not everyone is expert, and they may make mistakes, and they may say or do things that will be off-putting to a young person. So, um, so the bhaktas were, especially the responsibility of the bhakta leader, who was supposed to be particularly qualified to deal with them, and that worked very, very well. During the years that bhakti programs were the standard, we made an incredible number of devotees. It was an astronomical, incredible level of success. It was a very, very successful program. Later, it was difficult to maintain because we didn't have the number of devotees. A great many devotees left the ashrams for family life, and the situation was quite different. But so Srila Prabhupada gave some specific instructions, particularly with regards to children. They are dealt with in different ways depending upon their age and their temperament. And not every child is going to be the same. A parent has to utilize their best intelligence and try to understand how best to cultivate that child. And simply being very strict and trying to shove Krishna consciousness down their throat is often counterproductive. It's just not going to work. You'll push them away. They might never take to Krishna consciousness. You have to make Krishna consciousness attractive somehow or other. And demanding strict adherence is going to be unattractive in many cases. You have to use your judgment. But but also, in many cases, children welcome all kinds of structure. They want that, they need that, and they will feel actually insecure in the absence of that. So when you impose a certain structure, um, they can take to that enthusiastically and happily. But as I say, you have to watch carefully. You have to judge the results of every action and adjust things accordingly. You have to be very, very careful. It's a very delicate um, uh, practice. You just have to be very, very careful. You can spoil everything easily and quickly, and that's tragic. But and it happens sometimes. You can spoil your relationship with a child. You can ruin a child, and that can happen in both ways, either by excessive strictness or by excessive leniency. Both can ruin a child. So you have to use your judgment. Um, Krishna will provide intelligence. He will help you if you're trying to instill Krishna consciousness. And if you yourself are following the principles strictly, then you will get Krishna's help. He will provide guidance. He will help from within yourself. He will provide guidance as Paramatma. He will also help from within the child. Um, in all kinds of ways, he'll offer help. But there are also no guarantees. As you pointed out, Srila Prabhupada's own children did not become devotees. He had some grandchildren that became very nice devotees, but his own children, not so much. Um, and one of them was particularly a problem to ISKCON, tried to seize control of ISKCON. So there are no guarantees, but the general principle, of course, is always that you try to set a good example. You set an ideal example, which actually means that following strictly. You strictly follow. We try to follow in the footsteps of the previous acharyas who followed strictly. The Srila Prabhupada followed strictly. His spiritual master was very strict, incredibly strict. Um, so we try to follow their example, but not artificially, not beyond our capacity, and we don't try to impose strict adherence on others. Necessarily, better to set an example. Strict with yourself, lenient with others. Encourage them. Don't drive them away by dictating to them and forcing them to rise to a platform that they are not ready for. Um, I hope that shed a little more light on the subject. Just trying to clarify the issue.
Yes, Prabhu, it was yeah, very helpful. I was thinking that, when the question or when the topic of children was brought up, that you were a good person to give your perspective on that. And yes, generally the process is be strict with ourselves and uh, as you said, lenient with others. With some, of course, understanding that if you're a parent or a bhakta leader or something like that, you might have to do a little bit of pushing. Uh, but, I've heard it termed that you want to push people just a slight bit harder, just a slight bit faster than they would go on their own. So that's why they're living in the ashram, for example. But you don't want to push them so hard that they being pushed out. Uh, so, yes, thank you, Prabhu, for your comments. Are there any other comments or questions, additions, subtractions?
One quick last point.
Yeah.
Srila Prabhupada pushed his disciples very, very hard.
Yes.
often to the absolute breaking point. He was very strict and he pushed very hard, but not always. And one principle that he followed, which you will see in acharyas in general, is that they don't attempt to strictly impose rules and regulations on others before they establish a relationship. Bhakti-tirtha Swami, for example, is famous for his ability to reach people that the rest of ISKCON could not reach. And one of the means by which he did that was first to endear himself to those individuals. So he sometimes did although he was a sannyasi, and even as sannyasis go, he was a strict sannyasi. He was quite a strict individual in his own practice. And if you spent time with him privately, at least in my experience, God brother to God brother, I saw that he was extremely strict. Those who know him from the library party know that he was unbelievably strict. But with his disciples, he was often incredibly lenient. And he did things that that other Prabhupada disciples would often describe as outrageous, um, um, seemingly unbecoming the position of a sannyasi. Um, uh, so, for example, a sannyasi does not go sled riding. Bhakti-tirtha Swami went sled riding with his disciples here at Kitanagiri. He went on bicycle rides, and he terminated his bicycle rides at my house, where he and all of his disciples jumped in my pool. I'd hear some ruckus outside. I look out the window, and there's Bhakti-tirtha Swami and all of his disciples splashing one another and playing water volleyball in my pool. So, and a mix of male and female disciples. This is, it's not typically done by a sannyasi, but Bhakti-tirtha Swami did that because by doing so he he cultivated a very intimate relationship with his disciples. He endeared himself to them, and he also they became dear to one another. He created a sense of community, a sense of camaraderie. He built memories that would solidify relationships between all of them permanently. And then once that was established, then he could push sometimes very, very hard, extremely hard. And his disciples would knock themselves out to try to please him. No matter how hard, no matter how difficult, they would sacrifice anything at all because they loved him, because he had completely endeared himself to them. So there's a process. It requires first some cultivation. If you don't have the proper relationship with an individual, you can't then try to push them. But with the proper relationship, it's possible to push extremely hard. And Srila Prabhupada pushed us really hard, really hard.
Mhm.
I mean, it would shock some people, but none of us resented that in the least. We considered it a great blessing, and we knocked ourselves out to try to please Srila Prabhupada by any means. His disciples would do anything for him, absolutely anything for him. So, we regularly got arrested, and we suffered all kinds of personal hardship in the course of trying to somehow or other please Srila Prabhupada. And we do it all again 1,000 times in a heartbeat, because we love Srila Prabhupada so much. He his dealings with us were such that we could not help but love him dearly. And so in that condition, then it's possible to push very hard. So you have to know your position, and you can build a relationship with someone that will then make it possible to push them and elevate them beyond where they might rise on their own.
Mm,
But it has to be done carefully. You have to have the right relationship.
right.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you for your comments, Prabhu. I think we will end here. It's 8:35 already. So, Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai.